Percy. Hey, I saved the world. Zeus. Do you want to be a god? Percy. No, I want you to be better parents. Hera. Put him to sleep, dear.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Goblin King YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be doing a kind of another different video. Kind of getting away from the Lord of the Rings content. We did a Star Wars video on Sunday. Check that out if you haven't. I thought it was really good. A video I'm very proud of. Talking about Disney, Star Wars, and kind of the time on there. But in today's video, we're going to be getting back to kind of book reviews. And this is a series that is very close to my heart. It is probably the first, longer novels that I've read. All of the Percy Jackson books are around, 300-ish pages. So when I was younger, this is kind of the first, I would say, bigger books that I was reading. And I wanted to go back, reread all of them, and see if they held up. How well did they hold up? Did they feel kind of childish? Or did they age kind of like Harry Potter, where, yes, you can read them when you're early on, you're younger, but the themes get a little bit darker, things start to pick up, and you can relate with them more as an adult. So that is going to be kind of the objective of this video. We're going to go through the entire series, not just the first book. I do have the first book with me right here, but I've been kind of reading this series off and on for the better part of a couple months now, and I'm kind of in a position where I'm ready to review them. But before we get into the video, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment, please do. It helps the channel grow, reach out, appeal out, might like this content as well, and let's get into it. So I'm going to be doing a lot of comparisons to Harry Potter, because inherently Rick Riordan, I think, was heavily inspired by Harry Potter. I'm not sure if this is a fact or anything, but just based upon the way that the story is formatted. Again, we have this idea where I talk about within Fellowship of the Ring, or the Lord of the Rings specifically, we have a main character, Percy Jackson, who is oblivious to the world. He doesn't know anything going on with this idea that we are living codependently with the Greek gods, the Greek mythology. Later on, this is going to actually get even explored even more, between other pantheons. But for this series, we're only going to review this series. There are Greek gods, and they control some of the aspects of life. Percy does not know any of this. So when I talk about what's very similar with Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, it's a very simple idea. You have a character that doesn't know anything about this world, so while this new character, or this main character, is exploring the world, we are also in his shoes, and we're exploring the world as well. It's a very common thing. It's very easy to do. It's something that makes sense to do, and overall is kind of a common practice at this point of literature. So, why do I compare this so much to Harry Potter? Because inherently the structure of Harry Potter and Percy Jackson are very similar. So the idea with Percy Jackson is every single book, we kind of have this idea of a prophecy or some sort of quest. And so Rick Riordan kind of spells out what exactly is going to happen throughout this book without telling you. So it's a riddle. You're trying to figure out what this means right alongside the characters. And this is very effective. It works really well. It's kind of the same idea as Harry Potter, especially in the first 2 or 3 books, I would say. Even the 4th book as well, where you have this idea and there's a mystery. The Chamber of Secrets is opened. Well, what is the Chamber of Secrets? Who's opening it? There's a lot of things going on there. The Sorcerer's Stone or the Philosopher's Stone. Okay. Who is trying to steal it is one. What is this piece used for in the story? Is Voldemort kind of coming back? There's a lot of questions that we are introduced at the beginning of the book that are paid off by the end. Very similar type structure in, say, Percy Jackson. They work really well. And it's something that even me, as someone who has read through this series, and I've also read through the next one after this, I don't remember nearly as much. I remembered loosely the plot of the entire story, but elements of it I just didn't remember. For instance, I think the 4th book, Battle of the Labyrinth, I just couldn't even remember what the prophecy happens in the beginning of the book, and I couldn't really remember what happened. I know that Kronos, again, this is spoilers for the book series, but Kronos came back by the end of the book. He comes into Luke's body. I knew that was the big reveal, the big plot point. But I wasn't sure how he got there. I couldn't remember how Daedalus or I struggle with names, but how we even get to him or what was going on with that plot. So, again, these books work really well in the idea that we're given a mystery and we're trying to unpack it by the end of the book. It works really well. And very similar, again, to Harry Potter, is that Harry Potter, for the first two books, feels kind of more like a child's story. It has some mature themes in there, but they very much feel much more lighthearted, getting you into the world. Even though with, say, the first book, with the Lightning Thief, there are very heightened stakes, it still feels more lighthearted. It doesn't feel as dark. Whereas the series, when we get to, say, I'd say the Titan's Curse in this series, the themes start to get much darker. We start seeing a war atmosphere. And by the time we get to the last book, we see characters dying. It's very similar to Harry Potter, where the first two books seem very tame. We don't have heightened stakes. Harry Potter, when we look back on it, these are some of the more calmer moments in the Harry Potter saga, and it's kind of the reasons those two are usually looked at as, like, I would say the weaker two books, personally, but I do agree. I do think it is, makes sense why people would like them more than others. But when we get to the third book, and this is the same in both, The Prisoner of Azkaban, and when we get to Titan's Curse, inherently the story starts to get much darker. We start seeing darker themes. We start seeing things that are, the audience is kind of growing up with the series. It's not as, black and white on who is the main villain, and is this just guy, is he just evil because he's evil? And yes, we do see that within the Percy Jackson series. Kronos is inherently a villain that is kind of just evil to be evil. But that's not really the main point. The main point is as much as this story is about Percy Jackson, it's also about Luke. And Luke is kind of our main antagonist and the person we see really as the main villain for the first 4 books. He is this character that betrays Percy Jackson, our main characters like Annabeth, Talia, all of these main characters, Grover. He betrays them, and we're constantly sitting here questioning why a character like Annabeth still has some feelings for Luke, whereas we are with Percy Jackson, we're saying, this guy is terrible. I mean, he's getting innocent people to either be killed, or he's putting them in bad situations, and he's someone that's betrayed us, tried to get us, our main characters, killed many times. So we sit here, and it's an interesting dynamic, because we as the audience do not know Luke's full background. And when we finally get that reveal, and everything that Luke's gone through in his life by the 5th book, it makes such a compelling character. Luke is this person that his mother is basically insane. His father is not present in his life. He basically grows up without parents. And when you also build onto that fact that Luke knows that his father is a god, is Hermes, and isn't helping him, that's going to build a lot of resentment, anger. And we see that these are all things that Kronos plays on. It's one of the reasons Luke is able to be tempted over to the Titan's side. Luke becomes a very fascinating villain, and one of the great things that's very similar to, say, Harry Potter is that we don't know exactly who Luke is as a person, what his motivations are, until the final book. Very similar to a character like Snape, who is a character that, by all means, is a villain for us, the audience, until that last book. And even then, a lot of people still, think Snape is still a villain. He didn't really overcome what he put children through, what he put Harry through for 6 books. So again, there is this really interesting dynamic, because is Luke a hero? Because in the end, Luke is the one that takes out Kronos. But let's also consider how many people died because of what Luke did. He was the person that was the vessel for the Titans to come back. Now, you can put some blame on the gods. And there's another really awesome ideological thing that we think about here, is that if there is a higher power in our own world, why does not that higher power stop events like World War II happening, from cancer happening to people? Why do these things play out? Why does no higher being, if there is a god, or if there is whatever you may believe in, or if you even believe if you don't believe that there's a higher power, why do they not interject into this? And that's something that this series really plays along on, and a really strong idea. And it's something that I talk about, where it's a very mature theme that maybe as a kid, when you're first reading this series, again, when I started reading this series, I was very young, probably fourth, fifth grade. I remember going back to those like for, I don't know if this was like just an American thing or not, but we had these scholastic, I think that's how you say it, book fairs. And I remember getting these. Unfortunately, I don't have my copy of a lot of the ones I got. I ended up buying this series kind of completely new, except for the last two books, which I somehow found in the basement. But I was extremely young when I read this. So there are things that I didn't pick up on when I was reading this that I picked up on now. And I think something that Rick Riordan does really well with these characters is he makes them very likable, but they have a lot of problems. Whereas Annabeth is this character that she's the daughter of Athena. She's someone that when it comes to things that she can't build or things that she can't like work out, she struggles with those issues. And she is someone that struggles with her past. How does she deal with a character like Luke? As we're going about, we can see a strength and a weakness to Annabeth is her relationship with Luke. Because as Talia notes in the last book, it's one of the heightened things of the story is if Annabeth comes face to face with Luke or Kronos, what will she do? Will she freeze up? And that's the interesting point. And as we go through these books, we see Percy's relationship with Annabeth. And it really feels like, especially when I was younger, it felt like a lot of how I felt when I had girl issues when I was younger. I didn't really have a girlfriend when I was like younger. So again, I can relate to Percy Jackson because Percy and this story messes it up so many times. Like there's even a love triangle that happens. And a lot of times I'm like, when you see a love triangle in stories, it's usually not handled well. And this series is handled pretty well. And it goes to like point out glaring things that Percy's just very oblivious to, which I think works really well for Percy. Percy is this kid that he's not the smartest kid. He's not even the strongest kid, but he's clever. He's witty. He is a very likable character. And it's something that I think the movies definitely just did not hit on well at all. Also, to remember, these kids are very young as well. They're not like high schoolers. I mean, later in the series, by the last book or two, they are. But these are not characters like we saw in, say, the movies. And I don't even get me started on the movies. The movies are horrible. But when you look at these characters, they feel like people, and that's what's important. Grover is this person that, when he is introduced in the first book, he's someone that's very scared. He doesn't have a lot of courage at times. And by the end of the book, Grover is this character that, yes, he still has some of those insecurities, but he's the person leading the fight for the wild. He is this person that is basically the prophet of Pam, I think. I think it's Pam or Pan. I can't remember what the actual name is, but he becomes the prophet of this, and he is the person kind of in charge. It's a really fantastic storyline because, and this is my thing, I know that by the end of the Percy Jackson series, there's this hint that we could go to the next series, which is, again, going to bring in the Romans, and it's going to know a whole new story with our characters that we have in this one. I think the way this story ends, it didn't really need another continuation, because it really feels like all the pieces fit. Because as we've been seeing throughout this entire thing, what makes Percy such an interesting character, what makes him such a lovable character, is the relationships he has with people. His relationship with his mother, the relationship he has with Annabeth, which is with his best friend Grover, even his rivalries with Clarice and even Talia. When we get to the end of the story, and he's taken this dip in the river Styx that basically makes him immortal. That's outside of one weakness that he has, which is on like the back of his like shoulder or his back. It's at the center of his back. And we see that he is growing more and more like an immortal, right? It's extremely difficult to defeat Percy Jackson in the last book because of, again, how strong he is. He's basically like Achilles. And by the end of the book, because of how they're able to save Olympus, we see that he is offered to become a god. Again, this is not a new idea, especially with Greek mythology and things we've seen. But it's so fitting that when we look at something else that I really love about Titan's Cure, is it plays on the idea that Annabeth could leave Percy, that Annabeth could also become one of the hunters and swearing off basically men. That really worries Percy. And it's something that we see paid off when Annabeth has to worry that Percy will become a god. And Percy turns it down. But what Percy does and the way that this series ends is perfect. Where Percy says we can't really make the same mistakes that led to this issue. We can't be basically putting down the minor gods, not giving them any attention, not giving them really the justice that they deserve. And we have to be able to claim our children, be able to interact with our children, not make them feel like they're worthless. There's so many demigods that we hear go over to Luke and the Titan side because of this exact idea. Something that is very present in the first book is that Percy is not right off the bat claimed by his father Poseidon. He is someone that goes into the Hermes camp, and that's where all of these kids go that are unclaimed. And I want you to think about that from from the point of view of these kids, right? You're a young kid, you've just been introduced that there's this whole other world, and that you somehow have a godly parent. But that godly parent doesn't even really want to have anything to do with you. They're not even willing to claim you, let alone talk to you. You really understand where the rifts happen between the Titans and the gods. And a major theme of the entire story is on the idea of family. When we see by the end of this story where the reason the gods are losing is because they're not united. Poseidon is fighting his own battle. Hades wants to stay out of it and watch Olympus crumble. By the end of the story, the way that we see the gods able and the Greek Olympus, the gods of Olympus succeed is based on them being united. We see Hades come out and basically help fight Kronos till the very last minute, something that can help turn the tide. Poseidon is someone that gives up his home. That's another thing we're going to talk about, the idea of home. And Poseidon gives up his ancestral home to come and help fight. And it's the kind of the tipping point of the balance where that is what allows them to win. And there's also the idea of family when it comes to Luke, Annabeth, and Talia. The idea that Annabeth said, or that Luke said they were going to be a family because Annabeth felt like she didn't have a family. She had to run away when she was really young. And Luke breaks that. But that's the thing that turns him back, is the idea that they should have been a family. And I really love the way that this is played upon where, you know, you have a lot of these children, and it's something that I think is, if you are someone that grows up maybe not having parents or one of your parents left or whatnot, I think it'd be really great for you to read this story. I think you'd be able to relate to a lot of characters and the idea that it's not right for children to be left without one of their parents, let alone to both. In certain situations, like say someone like Luke. So I think that's a very interesting part of the story. And that kind of leads us to another theme that I really enjoyed in this story, is the idea of home. Because a lot of our characters inherently don't have homes, and we see that something that can really bind people together is the idea of one home or protecting a home. And we see this again if I use the example of, say, Poseidon and Hades giving up their homes to protect the main home, the one that brings everyone together in Olympus. Or if we even see it of this idea of Percy Jackson, the battlefield for the last battle of the Titans is Manhattan, where Percy lives. So again, the war is very personal for someone like Percy. Think about something like Camp Half-Blood. It's the home for so many children that don't really have great homes. Annabeth is someone that struggles with her family and especially her father for a long time on that idea. Rachel, we see kind of as the other love interest for Percy as the series goes on. She is someone that struggles with, again, her parents and her family. So again, we see this constant idea of a home, and protecting one's home is very important. And we even see the lack of a great home can lead to issues, again, with Luke. So there's a lot of great themes that I love in this story. I think it's a fantastic narrative as well, that we also see this idea that war is not something that is shown by Rick Riordan as being something that's very flashy and something that is we should enjoy to read. Rick Riordan makes it very personal. There are people that die in this series that we know from book one that are, you know, very much named characters. This war kills a lot of people that Percy knows. It hurts a lot of people that Percy knows. And the idea that conflict should never be the way. This should not have what everything should have came to. And because of the mishandling of this situation by the gods, it came to this point where a war was needed to wake them up. So I really love, again, a lot of the things that Rick Riordan did, and this is just kind of a small little review. I could have done this, much longer. I could have talked about the exact plot for every single book, but I didn't really think I needed to do that. I really wanted to look at just the overall narrative, some of the writing elements I loved in this story, and the narrative as a whole. So, again, I want to say at the very end of this video, massive shout out to Rick Riordan for the amazing series he created. It really got me into reading, for one. This is, again, the first series I really read through when I was younger, and it really opened that door to a lot of aspects that I now have a huge influence in my life right now. I mean, think about everything behind me right now. This is all because of reading, because of books, that I enjoy this world and making videos for you guys and videos on my other channel. So, again, I really enjoyed the series. If you guys have not read the Percy Jackson series, I would strongly recommend reading it. It definitely holds up. This isn't like a book just for children or very younger teenagers. It's definitely built for everyone. You can find something you enjoy in these books. And again, thank you guys all for watching. We're going to be doing probably Star Wars again next Sunday. We'll be doing the next part of that. Hopefully Disney doesn't give me a copyright claim. They got really angry that I used like 10 seconds worth of one of their soundtracks that was very muffled in the background. Classic Disney moment. That's all I'm going to say. But yeah, thank you guys all for watching. I'll see you guys all in the next video. Bye, guys.